Thank you, Joe, for the wonderful introduction and also for the invitation. I am really honored to be at the Foothill World Affairs, which have been working with Joe on sharing speakers with our program for many years. And I think this second time I came here to give a talk. He mentioned my book, but the talk today has nothing to do with the book. I gave him two topics. One was the book, the other was this topic. He said this topic is more relevant. So I'm talking about US-China relationship, which I personally witnessed all my lifetime, in fact, so important. And I came to this country about 40 years ago. At that time, the relationship was very good. And I benefited from that relationship a lot. And China was opening up. But in my lifetime, I just told my friends, two things I've never imagined at that time. One is China could return to Mao's time so quickly in the last 10 years, return to totalitarian control. Second, I cannot imagine how the US-China relationship could come to this low point, really low point. I would say lowest point in not only decades, in half century, since Nixon's visit to China. And other than many other issues, one of the issues a lot of people were concerned before June Secretary of State Blinken's visit to China was the interruption of the communications, especially high-level communications between China and the US, which increased the opportunity or risk of escalation into unwanted conflict. And early this year, Ray Dalio, the chairman of the Stone Bridge, he was so concerned, he said, the US and China were on the brink of war and beyond the ability to talk because each was very close to the other's red lines. And also, the other scholars talked about these two countries were collectively walking down a path of conflict escalation. At that time, they were so concerned. Now, since June, we have seen a parade of Joe Biden administration's cabinet members, 4 of them were in China. And Newsom from California, governor, he will be China, I think this month. And US Congress is organizing some delegations to China. But with all this kind of resumption of high-level exchanges, I don't see the tensions reduced. Both sides they talk to talk, they talked for talks. They acted, they have taken actions totally different, opposite to what they talked about. They said we want to put a flaw to prevent this relationship from escalating into a conflict. But they're taking actions to undermine, to challenge each other's best lines or red lines, as they talked about. Those kind of hawkish tones, hawkish policies has become new normal at this time. Then the question becomes, next page, and how these two countries have got to this point? Why has the communication not facilitate accommodation? And what are the prospects of the relationship between China and the US? These are the questions I'm going to answer in a very brief talk. First, let me talk about development. For many years, since Nixon visited China, the relationship was characterized with a cycle pattern: advance, setback, and crisis, then consolidation. We saw those kind of cycle pattern for many years. What caused those kind of cycle patterns? Shocking events, such as President Li Denghui from Taiwan visit China. with the United States. An mid-air collision between U.S. jet fighter and China's jet fighter and U.S. surveillance airplane. Li Denghui visited to the United States. And those kind of shocking events caused setbacks, caused downturns. But they came back quickly. Another cause of the downturn was the U.S. presidential cycles. A new president came to office, or very often they blamed their predecessors too soft on China. I will take a much, much stronger, tougher position. So when they came to office, then the relationship came down a little bit. When they sit in the White House, quickly they realized that this relationship was so important for U.S. economic, strategic interests. Then they moved forward to reverse the policy. So that's what we saw, this type of cycles. But current downside start from Trump. In fact, from tail period of Obama administration, the second term. Then through Trump and continued at the current Joe Biden administration, has not been caused by any shocking instance. Can you find that? All caused by the US presidential cycle. Despite all those fightings among Republicans and Democrats, one of very few agreements they have is getting tough on China. China is our rival. We have to act accordingly. That's a bipartisan consensus. Making things worse, the communications for quite a while before this June between these two countries somehow interrupted. During George W. Bush administration, they institutionalized so-called strategic and economic dialogues, and some other, over 100 mechanisms of dialogues between the US government and Chinese government. But they all stopped. Even the summit meetings somehow became less frequent. Both Bush and Obama visited China many, many times. They met Chinese counterparts in the US on the sidelines of multilateral international occasions, multi-times, even multi-times a year. Since Trump time, those kind of meetings somehow significantly reduced. Trump met his counterpart, President Xi Jinping, twice. One in Florida, the other was in Beijing. Then he met Xi Jinping twice at the sideline of G20, 2018, 2019. Only the 4 meetings. And the cabinet naval visits stopped 2018. Pompeo, Secretary Pompeo was the last cabinet member visited China until this June. In fact, Pompeo's visit to Beijing was a disaster. I was in Beijing at the time, had a dialogue with the Chinese counterparts. And we met US embassy official. They told us, wow, horrible, horrible. Pompeo was so angry. Why? Because he requested meeting with the president of China. They reject that. And he met with his counterpart, Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Only less 1 hour, but at the whole meeting, Wang Yi lectured him. How you Americans wrong, tried to sanction us, tried to launch war, everything. And China was known give respect to ceremonial aspects. Pompeo was not invited for dinner. They told us, I was really shocked at that time. And since then, those cabinet members of US visited China since then. And because of those official communications sought, diplomatic meetings at lower level degenerated into connotation of words of war. And the Chinese called 城枪舌剑, the words of war. At first meeting between Joe Biden's foreign policy principles and the Chinese counterparts in Alaska, 2021 in the winter, March, I think. And the temperature inside the room was cooler, chillier than outside. In fact, that was the case. That's what the media talked about to open up Secretary Blinken, very blank. We Americans are very, very concerned about China's actions in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Xinjiang, and human rights, everything. In the public, with a microphone, with media. Then Chinese fought back. His counterpart, Yang Jiechi, a top diplomat from China, he said, US, you are no longer in the position of strength to talk to us. And you have to change your bad behavior. Try to interfere in our domestic affairs. And Wang Yi, China foreign minister, also was very kind of fighting over hour in front of media in Alaska. You all remember that. And what was funny here was the Chinese media reported Yang Jiechi and Chinese delegation was not invited for dinner either. They ate instant noodles in the hotel. See, those stories you heard. It's so funny, so kind of interesting. Then after that, President Joe Biden met his counterpart twice, virtually. And finally, last November, met him in person in Indonesia at the sideline of G20. Every time, I watch those. Every time when they had meeting, there's kind of hope, a glimmer of hope. We will find some kind of thaw in the relationship, but that has never happened so far. And so this type of tensions, especially without communication, caused a lot of concerns in the US that these two countries, remember just several months ago, people are talking about war between China and the US, possible war between China and the US. Maybe they did not want to have a war, but they could escalate mistakenly into a war. Recently, I think President Biden was clear that he did not want to be the president to have war with Beijing. That's not in the US interests. So, in fact, during the Cold War, the US government worked with the Soviet Union government and had confidence building to avoid those type of escalation. And Joe Biden tried to learn from those practices. And he has proposed since then, in fact, since last year, to reopen the regular line of communication and to build what the US called guardrails and responsibly manage the relationship. China side said, yeah, of course. We want to have communication. We want to prevent the relationship from stumbling into a conflict. But say, you are responsible. Americans, you are responsible. And you have to take actions to create some kind of a positive environment. But in any case, I don't know if they met some deals. Last November, I said President Biden met with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and they agreed to reopen the line of communication to start by sending Secretary of State Tony Blinken, into Beijing early last year. What happened? A Chinese spy balloon flew over American airspace, which Americans said, how can we meet? You are sending spy balloon to us. Canceled. the visit. And that was in February. Department really wanted to reschedule that quickly. In fact, Treasury Department, Yellen said she wanted to visit China and commerce, everything. State Department tried to be in control of this relationship. They wanted to be the first one to arrive in Beijing. So they reapproached China again. Then there was a secret meeting between the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, and Wang Yi in a third country, in Geneva, in May. They reached agreement that Blinken will visit China, Beijing, in June. I think June 11 and 12, just one night. Very short, quick trip. That trip started a parade, as I said, of US government officials visit. In fact, within 1 month, 3 secretaries visit Beijing. Then in August, Commerce Secretary visit Beijing 4th. And what was, I watched all those visits. They talked the talk. We all pledged to continue the communication talk. But we did was totally opposite, as I mentioned earlier. Even during the talks, they did not reach any important results. Let's look at those pictures. And Blinken's visit was started a whole communication. And he tried to convince China that you should reopen communication on military to military, you should release detained American citizen, and many other issues. China did not give him any positive answer. And China lectured him. 2 photos, I think, really showed the situation. One was he arrived in Beijing airport, but he was not greeted with red carpet. What the Chinese netizens discovered quickly was this red line. This red line. Yeah, that's the Chinese symbol. That's a red line you cannot cross. On Taiwan issue, on so many other issues. Another highlight was his meeting with President Xi Jinping. See, Xi sat on the top of a huge table. American and Chinese officials sat on 2 sides. Very humiliating. Very humiliating for Americans. Americans are inferior to the Chinese leader. He accepted that. Just like in Chinese, they said pilgrims. It's just like a tributary state ancient time coming to China. Then Secretary Janet Yellen visits China. Next photo. Yeah, 2 photos here. Yellen visit did not accomplish anything either. And the Chinese asked US to remove those tariffs, technological sanctions, everything. He said, no, she said, oh, all we can do is just narrow those sanctions and restrictions. She cannot promise anything to China. But aside all those kind of substantive talks which did not accomplish anything, this photo circulated in the internet, both China and the US. What did you see from that photo? Yellen bowed 3 times. 3 times to Chinese vice premier. He did not reciprocate, just stood there. Oh, then back a little bit, give her more space to bow. Is that diplomatic protocol? No. I don't know how many Americans How many people in this room saw that video? No? Oh, wow. Viral in the Chinese media. See, Americans, they came to China, pay tribute to us. He did, she did. And then John Kerry visited China. His job was somehow easier, or seemed easier, to convince China to stop using those coal factories, to speed up the timeline of reducing the carbon side from 2060 to 2050. And also another thing he wanted Chinese side to do was to de-link the climate change collaboration from geopolitical competition. China said, oh, no, we cannot do that. Neither of them can do. Xi Jinping, at the same day he arrived, gave a speech, said the pace and the speed of our climate change goal is determined by us, not by anyone else. And Wang Yi, the Chinese top diplomat, told John Kerry that the climate change collaboration cannot be separate from overall relationship between China and the US. Nothing accomplished. And then Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo went to Beijing. And he removed 27 Chinese companies from unverified entity list to show goodwill. So China treated her much better. But she did not accomplish anything either. And the only thing I think she accomplished was to create 2 working groups between the Commerce Department of US and China's Commerce Ministry to work on those sanction issues. But those groups are not negotiation groups. Very clear from US side. Only exchange information. So we not negotiate on the sanctions. She said very clearly, we cannot negotiate on national security issues. Very clear. So US will not yield on anything to China. China will not yield to US either in that case. And while those officials when met with cold soldiers in Beijing, China rolled out red carpet for 100 years old Henry Kissinger at the same time of John Kerry's visit. Kissinger was a private citizen, did not have any, I don't think how many people in this room, maybe you are as old as I am, and remember him. But for younger generation, who know he is. He does not have those public influence, but China treated him much, much better than treat those American officials. Wow. He met Xi Jinping, he met Wang Yi, he even met Minister of Defense, which the US, his Secretary of Defense, Austin request meeting rejected. Treated him much better. What does that tell us? Of course, China does not like American government, and also they place, that's what they're not talking about, place hope on the people-to-people exchanges. And also, another message, nostalgia, that's a term, English I cannot pronounce well, kind of long to the good old days. Nostalgia, yes. Nostalgia, yeah, I can never pronounce it. Even you taught me today, tomorrow I'll forget. Sorry. And also, they really try to go back to the good old days, but that cannot go back. It can no longer. While they are, the official, they are talking, but they are acting, I said, in a totally different way. Let me give you some examples next. while they are meeting, talking, both sides taking very, very strong actions against each other. The U.S., after Yellen came back, the U.S. government, the Joe Biden administration, issued an executive order to ban all American companies to invest on the 3 categories of the Chinese companies of AI, quantum computing, and micro electronics. And the US, on the Taiwan issue, the US Congress approved $1 billion arms transfer to Taiwan. And for the first time, the US government used the Joe Biden administration approved a military transfer of up to $80 million to Taiwan under the Foreign Military Financing Program, which is normally granted only to sovereign state. That means US recognizes Taiwan as sovereign state. How challenging to Beijing? Who cares? And President Joe Biden and the Indian Prime Minister at G20, they announced a huge, massive railroad program from India to Middle East all the way to Europe. That's so clear counter Beijing's One Belt, One Road. After G20, Joe Biden visited Vietnam, upgraded the relationship to the highest level, comprehensive strategic partnership. That's also part of American broad efforts in Asia to counter China's influence. In the meantime, China did the same thing, and just around after these meetings. Beijing intensified, strengthened the ties with Russia in the last several months. In fact, this month, after Blinken's visit, they said China foreign minister will visit U.S. as a return. But Chinese Minister of Foreign Affairs never came. He's supposed to be, the State Department thought he will come for this week's UN General Assembly. He did not come. Where did he go? He go to Russia. He went to Russia this week to strengthen, to show China's determination to strengthen the relationship with Russia, and also lay a groundwork for Putin's visit to Beijing next month. This will be the first time Putin visited another sovereign state after the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrant to Putin. But China welcomed him, tell US, see, we work together. In fact, I read news today, Global Times, Chinese newspaper, said China and Russia will work together to stabilize the global order. In fact, the UN Secretary General, I think yesterday or today, talked about, in a General Assembly, talked about the whole world now is chaotic, dangerous. China said, we, China and Russia, we work together. The US, you are making troubles for the whole world. We are stabilizing the world together. And last month, the news came out. Chinese government banned all the officials and state-owned enterprises, managers to use Apple iPhone. The same day, Apple's stocks vibrate, lost how much? $200 billion. See? And also China, US sold weapons to Taiwan. China announced sanctions for 2 American companies. I think one of them is supposed to be in Colorado here. Let me see what companies they sanctioned. Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. I think they are in Colorado here. Yeah. And sanctioned them. So this is why Beijing and Washington have talked the talk, walked the walk. There are many causes. Many people argue. They cannot understand each other's bottom line. They cannot understand each other's intentions. I will argue it's opposite. They understand so well. Because of the understanding, they cannot compromise. That's my argument. Why? Let me tell you. We don't want to contain China. We don't want to hurt China's economy. China said, no, we cannot believe what you said. You told us. Because your actions, your policy is just opposite. You put so many sanctions on Chinese companies. I mean, use whole national power to sanction one company of China, Huawei. That's what they told us. We cannot believe you. You have tried to challenge us on Taiwan issue, on the technology issue, on trade, and everything. They don't believe. And American politicians, Washington now, is not shy of saying, yes, we want to challenge the Chinese Communist Party, contain that party. We want to prevent China from challenging American leadership globally. Very clear. And Washington also has its own. China said, oh, we'll rise peacefully. We will not want to replace America as global leader. We can never. But America said, no, we will not trust you. We will not believe you. You got rich, developed with our assistance. Under the liberal international order we created and made. Now you are powerful. You want to replace us. And you want to challenge our liberal democracies. We cannot believe you. And China's actions proved Americans' convictions. Xi Jinping has become so authoritarian at home, aggressive overseas. So each understands the other side so well. It's not they don't understand. And here are the issues. Let me go here what they talk about. Oh, there's the order I got wrong. Yeah, that's why the other one. So move further. Okay, those are the problems here I talk about. One is ideology. And for many years, China's communist or authoritarian system was not the barrier because both sides tried to focus on strategic issues, try to downplay the ideological differences for the sake of engagement for quite a while. The ideological issue became an issue only after the end of Cold War, collapse of Soviet Union. China was left as only the communist power. But Deng Xiaoping was very smart. He made a no-profile policy. Keep China not confront the United States. In the meantime, try to open up and reform to lure American business to China. Although Bill Clinton linked China's human rights with China's most favored nation status, trade status, but American business community was unhappy. And they pressured US government to delink human rights and trade status. So well, Xi Jinping came to office. I think the turning point was 2008, 2009, the global financial crisis, because US suffered. China weathered much better. So many people in China thought the US is doomed. US is declining. China time came. Xi Jinping said there's a fundamental change unseen in the century, 百年变局, in which the West is in declining and the East is in rising. That's what he is convincing. US is declining. And he became so uncompromising, so confrontational in relationship to the US. In the past, China always made concessions to US pressures. Now they said, when you want us to make concession, we want to you also make concessions to our issues, Taiwan issues, and other issues they demanded. Reciprocity now. And Xi Jinping proposed a new model of a big power relationship with three principles: no conflict, mutual respect, and win-win. The key is mutual respect of what? Core national interests. What are core national interests? These are bottom line of national survival. They cannot be negotiated. They cannot be compromised. Chinese Communist Party's regime security, territorial integrity and sovereignty, and development interests. That are so-called core national interests. You can work with us. You have to comply or respect our core national interests. And also they have 5 no's. I don't want to repeat them here. That you cannot confront us, you cannot put alliances against us, all those kind of new ideas. And especially here, the issue is on Taiwan. I'm glad the Consul General from Taiwan is here. He knows much better on this issue. And the Taiwan issue is what China called core of the core national interests. The only issue that could bring the US and China into a potential armed conflict. For many years, China had a strategic, I saw non-games with strategic patience for now 70 years. They tried to promote what they call peaceful unification, although they never denounced the use of force. And Xi Jinping now become much, much less patient. His patience has running out. He told the Taiwan delegations, we cannot allow this issue to pass from one generation to another generation. He has intensified the military brinkmanship, try to use force to force Taiwan to accept China's so-called peaceful unification terms, which become hardened. In fact, I don't want to get into them. Xi's biggest concern is the US involvement. And Xi's worry is not groundless, because US policy has been changing too. US, for many years after normalization of the relationship, have officially held a one China policy. China's a one China principle. Here, there's difference. China's a one China principle. US a one China policy. These are different. The US one China policy is based upon so-called 3 communiques, Six Assurance, and the Taiwan Relations Act, which is somehow different. China emphasized 3 communiques here. So, but US for all those years did not have official connections with Taiwan. But since Taiwan became democratic, and American politicians became more and more sympathetic to the Taiwan's democracy, and feel they are somehow attached to Taiwan. We should defend Taiwan. Their democracy, that does not us. We cannot let a dictator to take a democratic state. And China's military threat only reinforced American politicians' feeling we should work with Taiwan, this kind of feeling. In that process, US exchanges with Taiwan increased significantly. I think Consul General Huang could tell you all those developments. Really, in arms sale, everything increased dramatically in the last 10 or 20 years. US had a strategic ambiguity policy saying, we will help Taiwan to defend Taiwan. Not defend Taiwan, help Taiwan defend Taiwan. That's the key nuance here. And, but they never said what US would do. President Joe Biden said 4 times, said we'll come to Taiwan's defense, just like our NATO ally, if Beijing attacked Taiwan. That gave up so-called strategic ambiguity. And China was very, very angry, Taiwan issue. Then next page, we'll try to move, okay, here. This kind of situation, talk to talk, walk to walk, is very dangerous. And what I will argue, in fact, China has overreached. The US have overreacted in this relationship. Both sides have problems. When I say overreach, what does that mean? Meaning that China set strategic objective beyond the reach of its ability. Xi Jinping tries to make China back to the global center of stage as dominant power. I don't think China can reach that. That kind of objective only hurt China's national interests. In fact, Xi Jinping, as a dictator, has made many mistakes. One of the mistakes is its overreach. The relationship with the United States in that kind of situation, China economy now is in big trouble, especially after the zero COVID policy. Stupid, big mistake. China's economy has come down to the level have not seen in the last 40 years. The competition, this kind of confrontation with the United States, American companies are leaving now. They relocate their production to third countries. And the Secretary of Commerce, when she was in Beijing, he told the media, China is uninvestable place. That only accelerate China's economic slowdown and made China's situation much worse. And many economists now have argued that China's growth is peaked. China, in fact, look at the numbers. China's GDP in 2019 was about 70% of US GDP. Now it's only about 60. People said China would overtake US in 5-10 years. I don't know if that will happen, even in 30 years. Now, it's really not good, big mistake. US overreacted too, because their strong, active anti-China coalition has prevented rational assessment of China's threat. John Kennedy warned Americans early in the Cold War that not to see conflict as inevitable, accommodation as impossible, and communication as nothing more than an exchange of threat. But the US has just done opposite today in relationship with China. And I read those American books, read US leaders' talks. They already determined the conflict may not be avoided. So we have to take actions. If you assume that conflict is inevitable, then you kind of go in that direction and read the books. We have a conflict if China is too strong. We have a conflict if China is too weak. And a bizarre example of the overreaction was the spy balloon event. The US sent the most advanced jet fighter to shoot down a balloon in the air. At that time, they thought it was a spy balloon. And China said, no, it's not a spy balloon. We just a balloon of the cause. Then 6 months after, the US discovered, yes, this Sunday, Journal Mini talked to CBS, said, no, it's not a spy balloon. It did not collect any intelligence. They shot down the debris. They analyzed, found the sensor was never activated. They not only did not transmit information to China, they even not collect information. Now American government admit that, but damage already made. So the US overreach already helped Xi Jinping, because Xi Jinping became powerful in China not because of propaganda, also because of nationalist appeal to the Chinese people. Americans tried to contain us. We have to fight back. So all those American actions prove that. And this overreaction and overreach has put these two countries into the very dangerous brink of new Cold War. And let me conclude. Let's go to the conclusion part. And so I'm very concerned. I don't know if you agree with me about the prospect of the US-China relationship. I think both sides are responsible and must adjust their policies and ambitions if they are going to avoid another new Cold War or worse. And despite the concern, there are a lot of talk about new Cold War between China and the US. I don't think that's the case because the world has not come into the two alliance of ideological and strategic groups aligned with China or the US. The world still is multipolar. We still see those big powers, Japan, Russia, EU, and some other countries. They have not chosen side. They just in a balance. And even the ideological front. And China's authoritarianism is not appealing to many, many countries. And neither US could change China, neither China could change the US. So these two countries, you really have to find ways to live together. And they do share a lot of interests, such as economic, trade, such as the climate change, pandemic, everything. Unfortunately, the geopolitical rivalry has hijacked those shared interests. In both sides, there are people moderate in China and the US. But the hawkish positions, voices in both countries took dominant positions. And those moderates are somehow sidelined, marginalized in both countries. Those hawkish voices in China and the US, they reinforce each other. That's the problem today. And that will lead us not to a bright future. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you for your patience.
Hi, thank you so much. It seems like both countries are suffering from paranoid nationalism, as I read in The Economist last month. Mm-hmm. And what do you think is the best way to avoid? I do think both governments are seeing it as being advantageous to their home audience. And what do you think would be the best ways to overcome some of those difficulties?
There are ways, but I don't think these ways could be implemented in the current political environments in both countries. I think in the US government, even not scholars, for example, one scholar at Cornell University, Jessica Chen Weiss, she worked for the State Department for 1 year in the policy planning, came back, wrote an article in Foreign Affairs talking about China trap, and said that all the problems, maybe she's gone too far, said were created by American side. And she talked a lot of treat China as an enemy, what will happen, and how the US policy toward China has been not rational in her observation in the State Department. And some other people also wrote those type of things, but nobody listened to them in the US. And in China, the same situation. Those moderates, I know quite a few of colleagues in China, they are my friends. They are in a very, very, not only marginalized, very depressed situation in China. They try to help objective understanding of Chinese, US policy and also US situation. China propaganda said America is a hell and violence, anti-Asian. Chinese people cannot go to Asia and America. By the way, I have 2 visiting scholars from China. They came tonight. And when they came to the US, they were shocked from what they learned, propaganda in China. And those forces, those you said nationalist, not only national populist, nationalist voices on both countries are dominant. I don't know how much we can change that. They kind of paranoia on both sides. Americans have got used to what Graham Allison from Harvard, he talked about this is trap between rising power and incumbent power. US has been incumbent ruling power for so many decades, almost half a century, more than half a century. So U.S. cannot allow anyone to challenge its ruling power position. Even though China would not challenge U.S., U.S. would not take that, would not believe that. And China's action also proves U.S. cannot trust China. And China is a rising power on the hand. It's a rising power syndrome. They become so suspicious, U.S. You will never want us to rise to the peer power position. They will do everything to undermine our rise. To some extent, it's true. So these kind of suspicions, these kind of structural problems, I don't think it can be resolved anytime soon. That's why I'm very pessimistic. Really, I'm pessimistic. Every time I got those calls from New York Times, those reporters say, oh, there's a meeting between Chinese head of state and American officials. You see some good improvement. I said, yes, so what? Sorry, I'm too pessimistic.
Thank you. Next question over here.
How much sway does China have over North Korea, and how does that enter into the relations between China and the United States?
5 years ago, China somehow cut relationship with North Korea. For China, North Korea was a catch-22 problem. Damn, we go with you. Damn, we would go against you. Because China had some influence on North Korea for quite a while. But North Korea never wanted to listen to China. North Korea has its own ambition, own interests. But the competition between China and the US now put China in a position. When the US tried to approach North Korea, China said, no. We want to work with North Korea. So 5 years ago, Xi Jinping invited Kim Jong-un visit Beijing. They since then have really warmed up. Now North Korea needs to become a very, good product, good commodity for both Russia and China to try to use against the United States. So that's the relationship between China and Russia and North Korea at this time. They are very close now. North Korea, China, Russia, plus Iran is what I will call an anti-hegemonic coalition. They shared grievance against the United States. Other than that, nothing else they share.
As we wait for another question, I would like to ask one. With the upcoming visit with Putin going to China, what do you anticipate will be the conversation regarding the Ukraine and Taiwan, or what comparisons might be made?
Ukraine might be something they will talk most. China's position on Ukraine has been very delicate. Ukraine was the very close country to China before the war. Very close. They have a lot of agreements. China was the largest trade partner of Ukraine. Ukraine sent a lot of military technology ships to China. China could not get from the Russia. They got from Ukraine. They were very close. And Putin's invasion of Ukraine put China in a very awkward position. But for them, Russia is more important. So at that time, just 20 days before the invasion, Putin visited China. They signed that statement, have unlimited cooperation between these two countries. But after the war took place, China found the sanctions from Western countries against Russia, and which would affect their, if they have invasion on Taiwan, they will face same situation. And some other issues, Russia's dragged war. Russia could not get the war as quickly done as anticipated. Really put not only Russia in a very difficult position, also put China in a very difficult position. So they distanced themselves from Russia a little bit. But now the competition with the United States reinforced China relationship. But Xi Jinping met the Ukraine president once already. And their economic relationship was restoring. And the Ukraine trade minister visited Beijing. But all those are covered, masked by strategic competition between US and China, and China's strategic partnership with Russia. So Putin's visit this time is to attend the third Belt Road Leadership Forum. It's not about other bilateral, it's just multilateral. It will be 100 countries to attend, but no Western countries. Italy was the only country had signed the Belt Road cooperation agreement with Beijing. They dropped off now. So all poor countries, third world, global south. But China is successful working with global south. And so this occasion for China and Russia, they will show their solidarity with global south. So that, I think, will be that issue. And Russia has, Putin now has unconditionally supported China on Taiwan issue. He said all those even in this agreement back to last February, Taiwan is part of China, everything, just what China official positions. Whenever U.S. sold weapons to Taiwan, Russia joined China to condemn America. So they are working together so well at this time. But how effective, we don't know.
Question, given the politics on both sides that you described, and here in the U.S. being bipartisan, so it really doesn't matter which administration, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and the fact that Xi is probably not going anywhere anytime soon.
I hope that will be not the case. No.
And you make a good case that things are not going to get better, at least for a long while. If we get into a Cold War with China, and hopefully not a hot one, most of us have lived through at least one Cold War in our lifetime. How do you envision what might happen in a Cold War? Is it going to be driven by economics and trying to isolate China again? Or
I don't think they can really get into those kind of a Cold War. There's only one Cold War.
Yeah.
There's no Cold War at this moment. Because during Cold War, you see so clear two alliances, rigid alliance, communist and Western liberal alliance. We don't see that today. And China, it's an economic war. These two countries are so intertwined. Right. So a union, the highest level of the trade never gone more than $1 billion. How much we have between China and US? 700 billion. That's Secretary of Commerce when she went to Beijing. He said, we have a $700 billion business to handle. This is very different. And during Cold War, every country had no choice but the side with one or the other. But now countries don't have that kind of pressure. India, they work with the US, but they also work with China. They fight against China, but they fight against US. Japan, South Korea, Australia, you see all those countries, EU, they are somehow independent. And they can upset the balance of power easily. So that's why both China and Russia and the US try to get them, but they cannot. And ideologically, China is not Soviet Union, try to spread the communism at all, because its authoritarianism is not appealing to any country, maybe only third world dictators. People in the US talk about Charles' influence operation. I said,
how many people in America would want to live in China's authoritarian system? No. Nobody. This kind of paranoia in the US is an indicator of US no confidence in our own system. I came to US for democracy, for liberty, but I find some Americans not confident in what you have. This is so appealing to so many countries, especially to Chinese. They come to US. How many people want to immigrate to China? How many people want to immigrate to the United States? You can see that so clearly. And China is more afraid of American democracy than Americans are afraid of Chinese authoritarianism. They build wall, firewall, try to control all the information. Does not want to Americans, but Chinese people to know about America, the real America, because they are so afraid of America's liberal values, accomplishments, everything. So I don't think that kind of Cold War type of situation will take place at all. But on the other hand, I don't think China could be easily defeated either. It's second largest economy. It's not that former Soviet Union, a decayed economy and society. So these two countries will have to find ways to live together, to compete. The most important thing for China and the US is to make your own house in order. You compete for who can make their own people happier, who can make their own economy better, who can make their own governance effective, more effective. I think that's why I say, I told the Chinese friends, China's enemy is not America, it's China. America could not make China down. Only China could make China down. America's enemy is not China either. It's ourselves. So many domestic problems. Now the two parties cannot even talk to each other. I mean, this morning I watched the hearing, testimony, the DOJ secretary. Wow, that's America? Law, rule of law, where is that? So that's a problem of the United States. It's not China, not America. Maybe I'm too.
Any other questions? Then please, oh, yes, thank you. Richard, question? Yes, please.
Suisheng, very, very interesting analysis, and I agree with you. It's easy to be pessimistic. But to me, war is unthinkable. More confrontation is almost unthinkable. But conceptually, how do we ultimately get beyond? What about this? What if the two sides agreed both are going to stop the hot rhetoric? There's just too much hot rhetoric out there. There's too much. Secondly, we stop talking about competition, because competition implies somehow somebody wins, somebody loses. There's no standard by which to judge. So to me, it's a big problem using the term competition. What if instead we talked about collaboration? Collaboration on a variety of different areas that might, little by little, create some sense of trust. So Joe Biden says to Xi Jinping, I'm going to send a team over and we're going to collaborate, not just cooperate, we're going to collaborate on stopping the fentanyl, stopping opioids, and so on. We're going to sit down and agree on an outcome, which is good for both sides. Trade the same way, climate the same way. It's for collaboration, win-win, from what the Chinese tell us. Maybe little by little we can create some trust that we can work together for mutual benefit.
I agree with you. That would resolve the problem, but we cannot get to that point.
Not yet.
In China, if a US government, if Joe Biden could tell Xi Jinping, I can guarantee you I will suppress all those anti-China rhetoric, hot rhetoric. Xi Jinping will do the same thing. Easy for Xi Jinping to do that because it's authoritarian. He can just suppress. Shut your mouth, otherwise send you to jail. But can Joe Biden do the same thing to American politicians? There's no way. He cannot make any promise to Chinese side for cooperation. In fact, for quite decades, the U.S. emphasized engagement, emphasized cooperation. But then U.S. failed. Now the consensus in the U.S. Congress, even among a lot of opinion leaders, they think that China is the most dangerous ideological and geopolitical competitor and rival. That's their thing. Joe Biden cannot stop them unless Joe Biden put them all in jail. You think that will happen? Then we will not get there. How can we get there? That's my problem there. This is democracy. This free society. Unfortunately. That's why I'm pessimistic.
Thank you, Dr. Zhao.